Good afternoon, Reynoldsburg, and welcome to the District Lowdown with Dr. Brown. I'm Dr. Brown, your Reynoldsburg School Superintendent, and excited at each time we have one of these episodes, we get a chance to bring you a guest to share the lowdown about what's going on in our district from one unique or important aspect that you may not know much about. The last 5 minutes of each of these shows, we'll have a chance for you to ask any questions that you might want to, and we'll be answering those in real time. If we don't have answers here, we'll make sure we get answers to you. We also have another episode coming up in the next couple of weeks, which we'll have an announcement about. And also, we'd implore you, if you're watching this live, please stick around and continue to watch with us. But this will also be recorded, and you can watch it at a later date. So let's go ahead and get started. In case you guys haven't known, school finances are a pretty complicated and convoluted problem that we deal with in school districts all over the state. We're fortunate in our district, we have a treasurer who does a phenomenal job of doing that and making that really convoluted, confusing information make sense to us so we can put in place necessary programming for our students and for our district. I'm really pleased to have Tammy Miller, our treasurer, here with us today.
Thank you for inviting me, Dr. Brown,
Absolutely.
Melvin, because I'm excited to talk about school finance every chance I get.
We know, absolutely. We'll start just a little bit of background about what a treasurer does. I don't know if a lot of people understand what that looks like or what it means. Can you talk some about what your role looks like?
Treasurers in Ohio take care of all the finances in the school district. We're kind of the chief financial officer of the district. We're the accountant of the district. We also work as the clerk and secretary for the Board of Education. So anything has to do with money and numbers, that's what the treasurer is in charge of.
Outstanding. So just for those watching, we don't just get to spend money willy-nilly without any planning. It has to come through Ms.
Yes.
Miller. Why is it important that the work that you do in your department, why is that so important for our district and for our students?
Well, the work we do in our department, our funding directly impacts the services that we can provide our students. So when we get the money in, I work closely with you and other departments, and we decide how to best allocate those resources to have the greatest impact on the students of Reynoldsburg.
Perfect segue to when we talk about our mission and vision. We try to, our goal is to impact the now, so to innovate the future and prepare our leaders to do so. How do you think that the district finances connect to that entire continuum of our mission?
Well, the district finances directly impact that because, as I said, the services that we provide, the supplies that we can buy, the training we can even give our staff, all directly impact student achievement. And that's why you and I work so closely together on always keeping that mission and vision out in front of us so that every dollar we spend is spent appropriately and to further our vision.
Outstanding. For you, those who may not also know, we have a strategic plan that's been in place for about 3 years. That drives our work. So anything from a financial perspective that we're considering would have to go through the process of aligning with that strategic plan so it can make sense for us as we go into the future. You've got some really exciting information for us today with our 5-year forecast. The 5-year forecast is something that Tammy has to do twice a year that kind of gives us a 5-year look into the future of what our district is.
This is just a very brief summary because I know not everybody gets into going through the forecast like I do or to looking at all the numbers. I always have more detailed information if anybody in our audience would love to come in and sit down and spend an hour or so going over it with me. Each of the board members does that prior to approving the forecast, so they're very well informed. This is like a little 3 to 5 minute presentation of just some highlights of the forecast. So if you're ready, I will take the audience through it.
All yours.
All righty. So the first thing here, this is actually what our forecast looks like. It has 3 years of history and 5 years of projections. One thing you might notice is we do have some red down here, and red in the treasurer and accounting world is not always a good sign. So what that means is right now, based on this forecast that was approved at the May board meeting, we're going to start to see our expenditures outpace our revenues. Now, the good news is we have a very healthy cash balance because we have been so frugal and fiscally minded in this district that even though we're seeing this, we have a while before that becomes an issue that we have to deal with. But I did want to put that out there.
So despite the red number starting here, that doesn't mean that we're out of money and we're in trouble.
No, not at all. That does mean, though, that like a forecast, you always look ahead. That means we need to start looking ahead and planning for the future and seeing that this might be a problem for us. Now, as I go through the forecast, I'm going to talk to you about some things that are going to help mitigate that.
Outstanding.
So in a forecast, I always like to put this out there because sometimes people misunderstand a forecast. So I liken it to a weather forecast. The further out you go, the less reliable it becomes. And like meteorologists, things change and then our forecast changes. It's a working document that's based on a set of assumptions, and those underlying assumptions change quite frequently in Ohio funding. Some things that are going to impact our forecast is, well, to back up, this forecast is actually better than the one we had in November because some things changed after November. Real estate taxes came in way better than we expected. We had a partial reinstatement of a funding cut that we had gotten from the state last year. They gave about half of that back to it this year. Workers' compensation, we got close to $900,000 in workers' compensation rebates. That's unheard of. They've not done that before, so that really helped our bottom line this year. And we've gotten a lot of COVID grants, and you and I have worked together about moving some general fund expenditures to those grants to get some relief in the general fund. Development going on in the city, I anticipate that will positively impact our revenues in the future. And right now, there's state funding working its way through our legislature, and how that comes out, that will hopefully have a positive impact on our revenues.
We're all praying. Hopefully, if you're watching, make sure you are talking with your state legislatures in regard to the fair funding bill, and continue to advocate for its passage, because that helps districts all over the state.
Absolutely. So this is just a graphic form of what I just showed you. The green line are our revenues, and the red line are our expenditures. And what the board and Melvin and I use this for is we look out there and we know we need to start planning for expenditures rising, but our revenues right now not looking like they're gonna rise unless some things happen to impact those. This is our cash balance. Now, we are very fortunate that we have such a healthy cash balance that when we start to see some of that red, we have plenty of time to plan for that. Because you can see, even with that red number growing, we still have $5.5 million left, which is 21 days of cash. So we've got some time to think about how to plan for this and get ahead of this. This graph, and it may be hard to see at home, is just a rough breakdown of our revenues. So we get approximately half of our revenues from state funding. Again, that's why the state funding is so important to us, because it impacts literally 50% of our revenues. We get another 30% from property taxes, another 7% from income taxes, and then 11% from everything else. This is one of the things that I was mentioning that was a nice, pleasant surprise for us this May. We had trying to update this past January, and our property values went up 19%. Part of that is due to home sales, and part of that new construction that's happening throughout the city. That had a positive impact on our real estate taxes, which then had a positive impact on the bottom line of our revenues versus expenditures. This is a graph of our income tax, and I actually took that back to 2008, because back then is when we had another economic downturn, and I wanted to see how that economic downturn compared to the impact of this one. So back in the 2008, 9, and 10 time frame, we actually saw a decline in our income taxes of 11%, and then another 3%, and then it slowly started to recover, and then we had a pretty good recovery for several years. This time we saw a decline, but it was only 4.5%, which was quite frankly much less than what I had anticipated. And so we're thinking that that should flatten out and start a slow incline back up to hopefully get some more revenues back in the district. So it appears right now that the economic downturn due to the shutdown of COVID is not going to be as severe as the prior one. So if that holds true, this will be helpful to us. State funding, and this is a lot of numbers up here. I won't spend a ton of time going through it, but the message here is in 2019, we got about $39.2 million, and then we got a cut in state funding. They did reinstate some of this, but right now, without some relief from that state funding formula, that's going to be pretty flat. And this is putting some pressure on our revenues. This is a breakdown of our expenditures. Over 70% goes to salary and benefits, because like every school district, we hire staff to provide services to our students. And so that's where most of our money goes. It goes into the classroom for teachers, we're into support staff for bus drivers and custodians. And that's what keeps the district operating. Then we have other things such as purchase services, which pays for utilities, it pays for some of the special ed services that we do. And then actually supplies and materials and other expenditures count for a very small part of our budget. Now this graph I put in because I wanted to look at, there's some simulations out there about the possible impact if the new state funding proposal actually makes it into law. And I only took the first 2 years because that's all the projections they have out. But just look at just getting that state funding for these 2 years, we start really making some headway towards those expenditures. And then if it's actually gonna be phased in over the 6 or 7 years they're talking about, I anticipate this line to move closer to this red line here. So there's a lot of things that can be very helpful to us.
Outstanding.
This is what our cash balance would look like just with 2 years of the state funding. And you can see we're back up to over $18 million in 67 days in cash. So just the change in one thing has that positive impact on our revenues.
Wow. So if people aren't familiar with the fair funding formula that's being debated in a bill in our state legislature now, it might be important to do that and do your best to advocate for what's going to be best for communities all over the state.
So that is my brief overview of state funding, or I guess district funding in the forecast. And so again, there's a lot more detail on our website. We're gonna put this actual presentation out there. And I always welcome people to come in. I like to talk to people one-on-one about the finances.
She means that. She does love for people to come in. That is absolutely true. Really quick, I wanted to just put out there just really quick conversation about open enrollment and what that means for our district. We're currently what's called a cap district,
Yes.
which means once we reach a certain threshold of students who reside in the district, any other students beyond that who move in the district, we get zero funding for, $0 for those students. But obviously, those students are going to be served. That's our purpose. Open enrollment, the way we use it is basically to fill empty seats. So if you are in a situation where you have a classroom of 18, and let's say you want to cap that classroom at 21, that means I have 3 seats open that I can fill with open enrollment students. And guess what? Each of those students brings with them $6,600. That helps us move along and to support our revenue in reference to what we do from a financial perspective. How much would you say we accrue each year, roughly, with open enrollment?
Right now, we're getting about $3.5 million a year. And just to put that in some context, that's like a 3 3/4 mil levy. And also our cap now, we're losing like $6 million because we're on that cap every single year. So open enrollment helps to recoup some of that money, but it doesn't even begin to get all of it back.
And that's a point we talked about before, we'll continue to talk about, because it's important to understand how much the cap restricts the numbers of dollars that come into the district and how we're doing our best to be able to supplant that and provide some relief for those types of situations. Tammy, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
You make finances fun to talk about, because honestly, before coming to Reynoldsburg, I hated talking about the budget. I absolutely like it now and love to be part of the conversation. I'm sure we have some questions that we might want to entertain.
We do. Tricia is asking, based on this information, how long until the district is in need of a levy?
Well, as I said, a lot of things affect that forecast. So if we base it strictly off the May forecast, we're probably talking out of the November 24 timeframe. But also remember, there's lots of things that may change. For instance, if we get state funding, just that one piece is going to push us out to probably more like fiscal year 26, 27.
Very good. So it sounds like a worst case scenario might be 24, but we're more hopeful that it'll be further out than that.
Yes, yes.
And I think it's also important to note that we haven't been on the ballot for operating monies in 11 years,
Yes, it was 2010 is the last time we were on the ballot for any money.
which is almost unheard of for districts throughout the state. Typically, you'll see districts on the ballot every 3 to 5 years, depending on what their situation might be. We've been able to more than twice that. So it's pretty impressive what's been done with the finances here, despite
Yes.
what some folks might think. This is really the work that's being done.
Yes, definitely.
Excellent. Can you talk about the difference between an operating levy and a bond levy?
That is a great question, and if you don't work in the treasurer world or the school world, that can be super confusing. So an operating levy is just what it sounds like. It is money and a levy that the district collects to run the day-to-day operations of the district. Salaries, utilities, to run our buses. A bond levy, on the other hand, can only be used for capital improvements. And by that I mean like building a building or remodeling a building or putting a new roof on the building. So again, operating levy, day-to-day operations, bond levy, capital improvements such as buildings and structures and roofs and remodeling.
Excellent. Can you talk about millage? What it is and how we compare to other districts?
So millage is a rate of taxation applied to property in the district, generally real estate, property, homeowners, land, maybe like a building if you own a business, your house. And it is how districts get their money to operate, at least part of their money is that tax, the real estate taxes that we all pay, the bill that we get twice a year. Or if you have a mortgage, often the bank, you pay it to the bank and then they pay it out to the district. Because I get the question how we compare to other districts, I put in a slide for that because I was anticipating that. So the purple is Reynoldsburg, and you can see we're at 38.4 mils. Uh-oh,
You have to back up again.
that's
I should
okay.
have touched it.
There we go. So we're in the bottom half when it comes to millage, and these are all the districts in Franklin County.
Oh, wow, okay. When was the last time Reynoldsburg was on the ballot?
In May of 2010.
Those are all the questions that we have right now, but, Lou did ask about open enrollment, and so I'm not sure if he came in after you were talking about it, so can we repeat what you said about open enrollment?
Sure. We just talked about open enrollment being something that we can actually control. We're known as what's called a cap district, meaning the numbers of students who reside in the district were limited to the numbers of students who live here that we actually get funded for. If there are any students that live in the district over that number, we get $0 for those students. Students who come in via open enrollment, we actually get $6,600 per student based on however many come in. What that essentially does it for us is you said $3.5 million roughly? About $3.5 million of revenue actually comes into the district to help us recover the $6 million that we lose because we're on the cap. So having that mechanism is really, really essential. Open enrollment is something that we use only when we have the opportunity to do it. So at the example I gave earlier is, let's say we have a classroom of 18 students, but we know we can have a cap of 21 students. That means there are 3 seats open that I could have students in. We could then bring in open enrollment students to fill those 3 seats, have a full classroom, and those students we would have gotten funded for.
Those are all the questions right now.
All right. This may have been the longest one we've had yet.
Well, if anybody thinks of any questions afterwards, they can feel free to shoot me an email, pick up the phone and call me, stop in and see me. I'm kind of like the Maytag repairman. Nobody ever comes to see me to talk about school finance, but whatever helps.
Well, thank you so much, Tammy. It was great to have you here to share your insight and wisdom in regard to our finances. Our goal is always is we prepare our students to impact the now and innovate the future, and we're hoping that we've made that clear in terms of what we do with communication. The next time on the District Lowdown with Dr. Brown, we'll be speaking with the biggest celebrity in our entire district, Mayor Beggany. So we're excited about that on June 8th at 12 o'clock noon. There will also be a recording of that, so you could also catch the replay of that one, in addition to the one here today. And we've had 2 other shows already that have aired that are also available essentially on demand. If you want to stay in touch with the district and stay up to date, please be sure to visit our website and follow us on social media. We wish everybody a wonderful afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today.